I never saw it coming, not even for a single second. And looking back now, maybe that was the most embarrassing part of the whole thing, that I was completely, utterly blind to what was happening right in front of my face. Her name was Mei Xiu, and for 2.5 years, she was the reason I woke up every morning actually looking forward to the day. We met at a mutual friend's birthday dinner, and she laughed at something stupid I said, and I was done for, gone. I chased her for 3 months before she finally agreed to date me, and even then I thought I was the luckiest man alive. What I didn't realize, what I couldn't have possibly imagined back then, was that the whole time she was with me, she was watching my bank account like a hawk watches a field mouse, calculating, waiting, because the moment I started doing well financially, really well, the kind of well where people start noticing, that's when everything began to shift. I just didn't have the sense to notice it shifting. In the beginning, those first 3 months of chasing her, everything felt genuine. Or at least I believed it was genuine, which at the time felt like the same thing. She would text me throughout the day with little observations about things she'd seen, funny comments about her coworkers, questions about my childhood. She introduced me to her parents within 2 months, which I took as a sign of serious commitment. Her mother even pulled me aside at their apartment and said I seemed like a good man, hardworking. I felt validated by that. I felt chosen. Looking back now, I wonder if she had already discussed my career trajectory with her family by that point. I wonder if her mother knew what was being planned. I'll never know, and that uncertainty is its own particular kind of torture. When you discover someone has lied to you, you don't just question that person. You question everyone around them. You start to see conspiracies in ordinary interactions. You replay conversations looking for hidden meanings that probably were never there. At the time, though, I was too infatuated to notice any inconsistencies. I was too eager to believe that someone like her could actually want someone like me. I told myself I was being paranoid whenever a small voice in my head suggested something didn't quite add up. That voice would whisper things like, "Why did she always seem most interested in me right after I closed a major deal?" Or "Why did she mention money so frequently for someone who claimed not to care about such things?" But I silenced that voice every single time. I told it to stop being suspicious, to stop poisoning something beautiful. I even felt guilty for thinking such ugly thoughts about her, as if doubt itself was a form of betrayal. So I doubled down instead. I bought her gifts. I took her on trips. I introduced her to every important person in my life and watched her charm them all effortlessly. And I felt proud of that too. I felt like she was a prize I had won. It started small. She stopped asking how my day went and started asking how the business was doing. She stopped meeting my friends and started insisting we go to places that cost 4 times what we used to spend on a meal together. And I kept telling myself, this is just growth. She's maturing. We're both maturing. What the hell was wrong with me? I genuinely convinced myself that her suddenly caring about designer bags and private room restaurants was a sign that our relationship was evolving into something more serious. I even felt proud, like her elevated taste was somehow a reflection of something I had built. That is genuinely one of the most humiliating thoughts I've ever had about myself. But I had it, repeatedly. And then one afternoon, I came home early from a meeting that wrapped up ahead of schedule, walked through the front door, and found her sitting across from a man I had never seen in my life, both of them leaning over my dining table with what looked very much like a financial portfolio spread out between them. And she looked up at me with an expression I had never seen on her face before. Not guilt, just this flat, cold calculation, like she was doing a sum in her head and I was the number that didn't add up anymore. "This is Director Feng," she said, just like that, like she was introducing me to a business contact. "We've been talking about some investment opportunities," and I just stood there in my own apartment, keys still in my hand, completely unable to figure out what the appropriate response was to that sentence. I should have asked more questions that night. I know that now, but instead I went along with it because she gave me just enough warmth afterward to make me doubt what I'd seen. She cooked dinner, she laughed at my jokes again, and I told myself I was being paranoid. Director Fang was a business contact, nothing more. She even showed me some property listings on her phone, talking excitedly about locations and investment returns. I remember thinking it was good that she was interested in our future together. I remember thinking maybe this was actually a positive development, that she was finally starting to think like an adult about long-term planning. I suggested we look at a few properties together, and she smiled and said maybe later, that she wanted to understand the details first before taking up my time. How considerate of her, how thoughtful, how completely calculated. The really cruel thing about deception is how it makes you feel stupid in hindsight. But in the moment, it can feel like generosity. It can feel like love. And maybe it really would have been nothing more if I hadn't run into my old university classmate, Bao Wei, 3 weeks later outside a tea shop in the financial district. He looked at me with this expression that was half pity and half horrified fascination. And before I could even finish saying hello, he grabbed my arm and said, "Brother, I have to tell you something, and I need you to stay calm," which is never a sentence that leads anywhere good. He had seen Mei Xiu at a restaurant 2 nights earlier, with Director Fang, and based on the way she was looking at him, the way she was touching his arm across the table, that was not a conversation about investment opportunities. I stood on that pavement and I felt something cold settle into the center of my chest. Not heartbreak, not yet. More like the specific sensation of understanding something you had been refusing to understand for a very long time. Could she really have been doing this the whole time? Was I truly that much of an idiot? Bao Wei offered to buy me a drink, offered to listen if I needed to talk, but I told him I needed to go home. I needed to sit with this for a while. I needed to decide whether I actually wanted to. Oh, know the truth. Because once you start pulling on those threads, everything unravels. There's no putting it back together the way it was. She didn't deny it. That actually surprised me. I had prepared myself for the denial, for the argument, for the whole exhausting performance of being told I was imagining things. But she sat down very calmly and said, "Director Fang can give me things that you can't." Just like that. Perfectly level. No tears, no trembling. And I stared at her and said, "What things?" And she looked at me with something that might have been pity if it weren't so cold and said, "A future that's already secure. You're doing well now, but for how long? He has assets. He has connections. You're still building." And in my head, I was already spiraling into somewhere between disbelief and actual fury, thinking, this woman sat next to me for 2.5 years. She watched me work until midnight. She ate instant noodles with me when things were tight, and now that the work is paying off, she's decided to hand the results to someone else? What kind of logic is that? What kind of person does that? I told her to get out. She left without a scene, and I sat alone in that apartment for a very long time, wondering how I had managed to completely miss who she actually was. That was 7 months ago. And here is the part that I genuinely cannot explain. The part I keep turning over in my head because it still makes no sense to me, no matter which angle I approach it from. Last week my phone rang, and it was her. After 7 months of total silence. And her voice sounded nothing like the flat, calculating tone I had last heard at that dining table. She sounded small, tired. "I made a mistake," she said. "I'm so sorry." I didn't understand what I had. It turned out that Director Fang's promise of absolute security had been exactly that. A promise, one he never intended to keep. Within 4 months of them becoming involved, his previous business partner had accused him of fraud. The investigation was still ongoing. His assets were frozen pending legal proceedings. The secure future he had promised Mei Xiu had evaporated like steam. She had chosen stability over love and received neither. I heard this from a mutual acquaintance who ran into her at a market, not from her. She never explained the full scope of what had happened when she finally called. Part of me wanted to demand every detail, to make her articulate exactly how wrong her calculations had been. But another part of me recognized that those details wouldn't change anything. They wouldn't restore what had been broken. They wouldn't give me back the version of myself who had believed in her so completely. And I held the phone and I listened and I thought, Director Fang's secure future didn't work out the way she planned, did it? She kept talking, kept apologizing, and I kept waiting to feel something. Anger maybe, or satisfaction, or even sadness. But mostly I just felt exhausted, like standing at the end of a very long road and realizing the scenery hasn't actually changed. "I think about you every day," she said, and I finally replied, "That's a shame." And I hung up the phone and sat there in the quiet and thought about the version of me who would have been desperate to hear those exact words from her, who would have felt the entire world realign at the sound of her voice saying she was sorry. That version of me spent 2.5 years being completely wrong about someone, and I wasn't going to let him pick up the phone a second time.